Hi everybody, Brumbeck here. I've decided to make a video before Destiny is released talking about some of the problems I have with the game. This may seem strange since the game is not even out. I don't mean this to be a review or anything like that, of course, because I haven't played the full game. I just played the alpha and the beta. The reason I'm putting it out before the game has been released is because I just want to get it out there and have these points noted so that I can compare it to with the full game, kind of for my own comparison. I realize this is dangerous because I might look like a total fool for saying some of these points if I turn out to be wrong, but just a very brief background on my feelings about Destiny. It's an amazing game with some amazing strong points. Everyone knows that. Graphically, it's amazing. It's got a really beautiful landscapes and environments, and so on and so forth, all the positives that people have talked about. So this is not to say it's a bad game. However, I did find some really fundamental flaws with the game when I played the alpha and the beta, and these flaws struck me immediately as extremely serious and real problems that could make the game not anywhere close to what Bungie had told us would be the vision for the game and what we as players were expecting. So this is not meant to be bashing on Destiny, but I do think it's very possible a lot of us are going to be disappointed when Destiny comes out. Although, a note about review scores, I'm very convinced that the game is going to get probably 85 to 90 Metacritic, because let's face it, reviewers are time crunched, they need to put out their reviews quickly. Destiny is a great first impressions game. That's one thing that really struck me about Destiny. It's beautiful right off the bat and just so impressive. And so that creates great reviews because the people reviewing it will just get this immediate first experience that's so positive. And it's only really if you look under the surface and really analyze the game that you start running into problems. And again, I'm sorry to say, a lot of game reviewers are not going to play the game for 20, 30, 40 hours. They're just going to play it superficially, get through the story, put out a review. So the game will probably get great reviews, because a lot of the problems I'm going to bring up are more in-depth game design issues that I think a lot of developers and critics don't really think about quite often. So without further ado, I'm just going to get into roughly 20 points, and I will discuss each one in turn. So the first point is simply the number of locations, and I know this has been discussed by a number of gaming websites and articles and other YouTube videos that have done a very nice job to discuss this issue. And in case you didn't know, very briefly, there's only 4 locations in the game, plus one other, maybe like end stage, last boss area, perhaps. So there's only 4 planets, and this is a big letdown to a lot of us, myself included, because we were expecting more. We were expecting more of a whole Destiny universe. And I know they're telling us, well, this is a 10-year cycle for Destiny, and we're going to make Destiny 2 and 3 and Destiny 500 and all these expansion packs, and they've kind of been subtle about that because they don't want people to get the sort of downer note of like, well, hey, you can buy Destiny 1, but if you want to really explore the universe, buy Destiny 2 and all the expansion packs. But it's pretty obvious that's what they're doing. They're not going to support this game, Destiny 1, for 10 years. It's not going to happen. Activision is going to want more $60 titles, more purchases. But anyway, so the 4 location issue, if we look at the alpha and the beta, basically we've already explored one of the locations, that is Earth, almost in its entirety. And I know Bungie has said, no, wait a minute, that's not the whole location. There's a bunch of extra little areas that you can go fight some high-level enemies. And okay, so there's some caves and basements we haven't looked at. But let's face it, overall, we've explored Old Russia, which means we've explored the entire Earth, which I just think is a crazy thing right there that I don't think we should just accept as gamers. That, wait a minute, you're building this whole world, a universe, I mean, of Destiny, and on the Earth location we only have Old Russia. I think there's a lot more to Earth than Old Russia. Maybe they're going to give us some story reason that the entire Earth has been destroyed and radioactive except for Old Russia. But anyway, the Old Russia location was beautiful, no doubt, but it just wasn't enough. The idea of that's all there is for Earth, and the fact that there's only 3 other planets, Mars, Venus, the Moon, that's just not very many areas. And when it comes down to playing a game, especially a game that they want us to play a lot, especially a game that seems to be geared toward grinding, which we'll get into more later, and also doing fetch quests, kill 10 enemy quests, this type of, and replaying missions, play the strike mission 5 times, play the story missions over and over. Having so few locations is just not acceptable. And I know they say, well, the locations are large. Well, Old Russia, I'm sorry to say, I did not find to be large. It's partly because you can get on your little vehicle at any time, your Sparrow or whatever other vehicles the game might give us in the full version. You can get on those vehicles and just drive around. And on the vehicle, I tried to time it in Old Russia when I was playing the beta. It only takes 4 to 5 minutes to drive around or hover around, whatever you want to call it, all of Old Russia. That's just not very long. And the location of Old Russia, it's beautiful, but it's not that distinct in the different locations of the actual Old Russia area. One area in Old Russia looks pretty similar to the next area. So it's kind of just a big area that's all the same and can be traversed in 3 to 4 minutes or 4 to 5 minutes. So I presume the other locations are going to be just as roughly the same size. I doubt any of them are larger than Old Russia. I could be wrong. Maybe Mars, they've shown desert screenshots. Maybe Mars is going to be much larger. Could be. So I could be wrong on this, but still, even if the locations are larger, only 4 areas is, to use a term the kids used to say, it's weak sauce. Does anyone still say that? It's weak sauce. It's just not a spicy meatball of game content we wanted. It's just weak sauce. It's boring, vanilla. Let's compare it to Borderlands 2, which I'm sorry to have to compare to Borderlands 2, but let's face it, no game is created in a vacuum and no game is released in a vacuum. There's other games, other competing games, and Borderlands 2 is most obviously a direct competitor to Destiny, being very similar in a lot of ways. Borderlands 2 shipped with about 15 really unique locations. Some of these locations were obviously not as detailed or as diverse as Old Russia, or presumably Mars, Venus, and the Moon will be in Destiny. But the point is, it had 15 plus unique locations. So Borderlands 2 took a long time to play. There was a lot of quests, a lot of you could grind areas to fight bosses to get unique guns, but the point is there was a lot of area diversity. So it kept the game interesting. Diversity is the spice of life. Destiny, it's such a concern to me. 4 locations, that's just not enough. And that's really all there is to say on that. Alright, friends, so this next point may be a little controversial, but please bear with me in what I'm going to say. What I'm going to say is, let's just take the area Old Russia, because it's the only area we've seen. When I played it, I got the feeling that this was an area that was sort of created way back when, as kind of like a proof of concept or tech demo sort of, to show, hey, let's just create a really cool area, and then after that we'll figure out what to do with it as far as content like story, quests, enemies in that area. Because Destiny, the Old Russia area, felt a lot like a prefab location, prefabricated. Meaning, if you're going to buy a building, you can get a prefabricated building for a lot less money than you can a custom-built building. The prefab building is going to look a certain way and you can't really change it. That's the kind of idea behind prefab, as opposed to a custom location built. So in video game terms, a custom location would be something built specifically for the enemies, the story mission, the boss you're going to encounter. We see this, for instance, I'm sorry to bring up Borderlands 2 again, but in Borderlands 2, there's certain locations where you fight certain bosses. And those areas are clearly built to guide the player through to reach a boss location. And then the boss location might be this really cool fort that you have to break into, climbing up a bunch of stairs or walkways and ladders to get up to the boss. And you really feel like you're, blazing a trail through this area to reach the boss. And so that's what I mean. That's a custom-built area. Borderlands 2 has a lot of those areas. And Old Russia, to me, was kind of strange because it just seemed like a big open environment, very MMO-like, which I know they're kind of borrowing from that, and some people might say, well, there's nothing wrong with that, but there is in the sense of telling a story. Even look at the Halos. You've got levels you go through where it's clearly built up to a boss fight. In Destiny, it's all just kind of the same, just random environments. Old Russia environment. It's beautiful, but some of the missions that you had in Destiny, even in the beta like we played, where you have to go to those broken down, rusted boats and hit that button, or ships, and hit the button to scan it with Ghost. Like why there? Why were the transmissions there on the broken down ships, why not somewhere else? It wasn't like that was specifically built for that purpose. It was just, hey, this is a really cool location that we've built, again, beforehand, and now we're going to throw a quest at that location. Let's do a story mission there, have the player go there because it's a cool area, we want them to see it. And this is the problem with that a lot of MMOs have. And this is one of those intangible problems to a certain degree that a lot of players won't recognize, but they do feel is a problem. MMOs tend to way oversell what you're going to do on the quest when they tell you, like, hey, go to this village, save these people. It's going to be, it's a huge problem right now. You need to go save the village. And you get there and the village is fine. But then you activate the quest and 5 thugs appear. And you kill the thugs and then you're done. It just feels very anticlimactic when you go through all that in a lot of MMOs. And that's kind of how I felt with the Destiny beta, if I'm going to be honest, with Old Russia. Some of those missions, hey, go get this transmission, we really need the information on it. And it's just at some random location in the area. Because it's just right there. Just scan it and go. It's like, wow, I didn't even have to go through any sort of custom-built dangerous area to do that. The point is they're reusing so much of Old Russia over and over and over again. You're just going through so many missions that overlap in the areas. And it's one of those things, after I played the beta, and I would encourage everyone else to think back if you played the beta, were there any missions that you really can remember you were at a unique and distinct location in Old Russia? In general, it was all the same. And even with the strike mission they gave us, that was a fun mission, but the strike mission occurred in the same place we'd done other missions at before. So it's all just like they're just recycling their areas. Again, let's compare it to Borderlands 2. Borderlands 2 has unique areas for all their missions. And compare it to Halo. Compare it to any sort of story-driven game. And that's the problem. It looks like the areas, especially Old Russia, was built way back when, kind of like as proof of concept. Maybe that's what they took to Activision and said, hey, see, this is what we're building. Isn't it great? It doesn't seem like an area actually built for the story they're telling. It's just sort of a prefabricated location that's cool, but not custom built. So you might be saying, well, why does it matter, Brumbick, in that case, between prefab and custom built? Well, the reason it matters is because that just adds to what we call ludonarrative dissonance. What does that mean? That just means when we compare the elements of the narrative a game's telling and the gameplay you're actually playing, the two don't match. Most commonly, the narrative will be telling you you're doing something epic, and what you're actually doing is, say, pushing a switch in the game to win. That creates dissonance, this creates confusion and distortion between what you're being told you're doing. It's like, hey, we really need you to save the world. Go press that button. And so you press the button and you win. That's an extreme case of ludonarrative dissonance, where I thought I was going to do something epic, and I didn't. Plenty of other games have had issues with this. Well, with Destiny, the problem I have is the Old Russia location, what they tell you as far as lore goes, that it's some old, scavenged area that's been like that for, I think they said, like hundreds of years or something like that. So the problem, too, is all of a sudden you can just go find these key points where there's an active radio transmission that no one has found yet that you need to activate. This is a problem that a lot of MMOs also encounter, where it makes no sense. If this area has been scavenged and abandoned for so long, how is it that there's a critical piece of information just lying out right in the open? For instance, the transmissions on the boats that we were talking about. There's these transmissions that no one has activated yet? Why has no one activated them? They're right out there in the open. It makes no sense. That's why games, good games that want to tell a good story, build custom locations for certain missions like that, because they realize if they just put it out in the open, that's going to be cheap. It's not going to make you feel real epic. They need to put it in a custom location where you have to fight through waves of enemies, or fight through a big dungeon to get to some place where the actual quest location occurs. You can't just throw out a radio transmission in the middle of the Old Russia area and say, oh, this is critical to us saving, whatever we're saving in Destiny, fighting the darkness. It just makes it very cheap when you do that. So let's talk about the location Old Russia just briefly. itself, and a lot of other critics and people have had a problem with the how Old Russia felt sparse. It felt strangely empty, despite the fact that graphically it was so full of detail. Almost too much detail. I was amazed how much detail they spent on such little things, little rocks and chains and flowers and just all these little details. It's incredible from an art standpoint. I loved it from an artist standpoint. I thought they did such a brilliant job. But as far as content goes, there just wasn't a lot happening. It was just kind of empty. Again, it's the typical MMO problem that a lot of us have had with MMOs for a long time. People have made jokes about this, how, you've got monsters in a certain location and they never move, and they're just there, and you got wide empty spaces where nothing happens because they just want you to waste time walking back and forth between quests. And I know Destiny's not intended to waste time because you got your vehicle to drive through, but Old Russia just felt very sparse as far as content. And I know some people who brought up this issue too said, well, it's just a beta. In the full version, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more to do. Unfortunately, if you recall, the Destiny, whoever he was, who worked for Bungie, Destiny PR guy or something, came out and said, yeah, the content in the beta, that's pretty much the full game. I mean, we're not changing things. What you saw in the beta is what the full game is going to be, which I expected from the start, because let's face it, the beta was not a true beta. It's not like they were actually trying to test for bugs and such. It was a server test mostly, and also, let's face it, a marketing strategy. Let everyone play it for free, see how great it looks, because again, Destiny is a great first impressions game. But anyway, getting off track here. So the point is, the locations feel just very sparse. Old Russia, there just wasn't a lot going on. And now let's talk about the fetch quests. I'm actually shocked that Destiny includes fetch quests. What I mean is the Explore mode. The Explore mode is a very cool idea, the idea of just exploring the areas, since, like I said, one of the greatest strengths Destiny has is just the amazing graphical detail of the locations. The problem is the Explore mode, to me, was kind of a big letdown, because I'm supposed to explore and do whatever I want, but all of a sudden there's all these beacons everywhere with quest markers saying, hey, go here and do this. And let's face it, all gamers, if you put quest markers right by them when you start an area, they're naturally going to go to that location. So the Explore mode, to me, seems like it should be renamed like a Minor Beacon Fetch Quest mode. That might have been a long name for it. Anyway, the thing is, let's just face it, they were just the typical obnoxious, silly fetch quests. Hey, we really need you to kill 10 enemies and collect stuff, because reasons. And yeah, collect 6 of these items, because just do it. It's obvious that these are just designed to help you grind currency and grind some items or marks or whatever. They're just not enriching to the story. Like, I don't know anyone who I talked with who played the beta and said, yeah, gee, I really loved those beacon quests. They were just really, inspirational. They're fetch quests. Let's face it, I can't believe Destiny includes all these obnoxious fetch quests. That's just bad design. I mean, let's just say it. I may be the only one who's going to say it, but Destiny fetch quests, that's just bad design. Fetch quests should not be included in games these days. If you're going to do a fetch quest, do it in a meaningful way. Again, let me think of a game that did it well. Borderlands 2. Borderlands 2 had a number of side quests where you had to go get an item. Not too many, actually. It was mostly go kill somebody. Maybe they'll drop an item. But anyway, but the thing is, Borderlands 2 gave you interesting NPCs who would give you the quests, and they usually had funny stories about them. They just put a lot of effort into actually making the quests have a lot of backstory, and when you completed it, good voice acting to tell you why it was meaningful, what you did, because, it was a favor for a friend. In Destiny, it's not like you're doing a favor for a friend. It's just some random NPC tells you, hey, we need 10 items, and it's so obvious they don't need them. I mean, again, the problem with making an MMO is that you have literally millions of other players doing the same thing. So it's that ludonarrative dissonance. The character says, hey, we really need those items. Get 10 of them for us. And in the mind, you're thinking like, in your mind, you're thinking, do you think I'm stupid, NPC? I know you've been telling every other player the same thing. And I know some people say, well, Brumac, that's too harsh. MMOs just have to be like that because they have all the other players in the game. Well, maybe using MMO structure for quests is not a good plan. I mean, why Why should we just give MMOs a pass? Because that's how they do it. Maybe they do it incorrectly. Anyway, the Explore mode was kind of crazy with all the beacons. I mean, I'll just end it there because let's face it, fetch quests are terrible. Terrible. Continuing on Explore mode, I would like to point out as well, there was not much to explore if you take that and really analyze what were you exploring, because, ironically, in order to unlock the Explorer mode, you had to do the other missions, I believe, and I think that's how it's going to be in the main game. And doing the other missions took place on Old Russia at the same locations, basically. So, ironically, going through all the story content is exploring Old Russia. And so when you have an Explorer mode, it's not like there's new stuff to explore. It's not like they added anything to Explorer mode. The only thing they added was the beacons. And yeah, I talked about how great those beacons were. So they do have the golden chests, so let me go into that. These like, I think Old Russia had 5 golden chests that contain special loot, and I've been told in the full version there'll be a better chance to get even like blue items, which we didn't see in the beta. Anyway, 5 golden chests, and there's 4 locations in the game total, if you recall. So let's just assume, even though I know it's not true, let's assume each location has 5 golden chests. 4 locations times 5, 20 golden chests total in the whole game. And maybe there's more somewhere else, I don't know, but that's what it seems like, 20 in the whole game. Let's compare this to Borderlands 2. Borderlands 2, each location, and again, there were 15 plus locations depending on how you count, each of those locations had fun stuff to find, like the Borderlands symbols. You know, that's no big thing. That's just an extra little frivolous thing, but it's something. Helps you give you reason to explore. Also, Borderlands 2, each area usually had 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chests in the area, and each chest had a chance to give you good loot. You know, some chests had better chances than others, depending on how hard they were to find. So Borderlands 2 gives you 15 plus areas, you know, 5 chests per area, let's just say. And so that was fun. You could go find them. And also, I'd like to point out, you could keep finding them. Every time you went into an area, you could go back to those chests. So you had a reason every time you went back into, let's call Borderlands unofficial Explorer mode, you could just go back and get the chests. Destiny, 5 golden chests, and after they're taken, they're gone forever. So 20 in the total game, and then they're gone? I mean, that's just not enough. I should clarify, I know some people are going to say, well, yeah, but Destiny also has a bunch of those other random chests that appear in certain locations that aren't the golden chests, but they're chests that you can keep opening every time you go back to the area. So that maybe is a better equivalent with Borderlands 2's chests. Fair enough. The only problem is in Destiny, how it worked in the beta and alpha, those chests contain just boring stuff. It wasn't a chance to get really cool guns. It was just a chance to get some glimmer and maybe a green item. And I don't think those chests ever had a chance to give you the higher blue items or exotic weapons. From what, again, I don't know this for a fact, from what I've been told by the birdies or whatever, is that those chests don't give you a chance to get the really good loot. In Borderlands 2, all the chests give you a chance to get the best legendary guns. The chance is ridiculously low, I will grant you. But the chance is there, and it's all about psychology, you know. If I see a chest, it's like, oh, it could be a great gun. In Destiny, when I saw a chest, it was like, it's just going to be some glimmer. Maybe a white or green item, you know, no big deal. So what I'm saying is, from a psychological standpoint, the Destiny chests are just not nearly as rewarding. I'd also like to point out the Destiny chests are in really weird locations, which is another example of, like I said, with the whole prefab Old Russia location, how it was built beforehand. It just seems like they picked random locations and threw a chest there, which I do have a problem with from a lore and from a narrative standpoint. If you're going to say this is an area that's been abandoned for hundreds of years and there's lots of other scavengers who've gone through this area, how is it that there's just chests? Like there was a chest on the top of one of the airplanes that occasionally spawns there. I mean, who would put a chest there? That makes no sense. And plus, if you notice, the chests look all pristine. And some people might say, oh, Brumbeck, nitpicking, but having a pristine chest in the middle of this abandoned area that's all decayed and rusted, that's just an example of, again, oversight. Just poor design, in my opinion. It's an example of, you shouldn't have these pristine chests in these bizarre places. Like, if you want to do like a hidden weapons cache or cache, you should do it, you know, like under some twigs on the ground, where if you're really looking, you can find it. That makes sense. Someone would have actually hidden stuff there. You know, the masters of design of environments like Bethesda with Skyrim and Fallout 3. You know, that they did that so well with having a skeleton that's sort of you can see, and then if you look further, he's reaching toward a little hideout or a little stash that he puts stuff at. That's really cool. Destiny doesn't have any of that. Instead, Destiny goes with generic Old Russia location with just these pristine chests we've just plopped down in certain locations. And certain hard to get locations, like get to locations, like on a cliff. Like there's a couple that spawn on a cliff and you have to go right to the edge and look there. Who would put that there? A pristine chest? How'd they get it there? I mean, did they like forklift it down? Or, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So that's just a small example, and you could say, well, that's just petty. But it all adds up. It would be much better if they actually used the environment, like a little, in the mountain, a little alcove and a little rock, a loose rock that you could open. You know, kind of like how Red Dead Redemption had the gold you could find that was hidden all around. It's just a way to add logic to your game, and so you don't have these bizarre chests just in random locations. Now let's move on to weapons, and this particular topic is a real pet peeve of mine as far as how you get exotic weapons. We don't know in the full game how you get them in the entirety. There might be other ways to get them, but when you go to the town, I noticed that the NPCs can sell you exotic weapons. You know, exotic weapons presumably being akin to legendary weapons from other games. What I find bizarre about this, if you just think about it, and bear with me, but really think about this one. So let me get this right. I'm like sort of one of the last Guardian types they've found. You know, Ghost found me. He's very excited because I can help save the world or the whatever universe. But I start with these weak guns, the white guns or the green guns, but the NPCs, you're telling me, in the tower already have a huge stockpile of exotic weapons? How did they get these? And they're not going to give me one? It makes no sense when you talk to an NPC and you know he's so earnest about, oh, we need you to do this, you're the chosen one. I'm just making up the dialogue because I don't know what the full game will be, but it's probably going to be something like that. You know, we need you to do this, but, you know, we're not going to give you one of our good weapons because, you know, you're going to have to grind out currency for many hours to get our good weapons. It makes no sense. It just is completely illogical. Does anyone else see this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills here. For instance, how does, I don't know, Borderlands 2 do it? Borderlands 2, you can't just go buy legendary guns from the vendors. You have to find them yourself from killing enemies, so it feels cool, or you have to find them in the environment, again, from chests. You know, only in the DLC did they add, like, vending machines, but that made sense, because in Borderlands 2, guns were actually manufactured by these different companies, and they were still being manufactured. In Destiny, it makes no sense, because it's supposed to be this broken down world where we've lost a lot of technology and, you know, things are looking bleak. And yet the NPCs in the tower have these huge stockpiles of exotic weapons, but they're not going to give you those, even though you're the chosen one trying to save the world for them. Because, you know, well, I have a business to run. Just because the world's falling apart and we need you, I'm just not going to give you one. And again, how did they get one? The real reason this is a problem is because psychologically it's so less fun to go grind currency, you know, go kill enemies, grind currency, go to the tower, buy an exotic weapon from an NPC. I should mention a nondescript, boring NPC at that. That's not nearly as fun as going and fighting and exploring, opening chests, killing bosses, and getting the exotic weapons that way. It's just bad design to have NPCs sell exotic weapons. It's a typical MMO thing again, but that's not good. And I suppose I should briefly mention NPCs in general that we saw in the tower. I know there's going to be more NPCs in the full game that take place or you encounter during the story. I know there's at least that one female Guardian type that we've seen in some very brief cutscenes. But in the beta that we played in the tower, the NPCs were boring. They didn't have schedules. They didn't move around. They didn't even sit. A lot of them just stood there. And they were just not interesting. You didn't get to know their names. You didn't get to know their backstory. They were just the random, typical NPCs that, you know, we've been doing since the 80s. You know, vendors. They're just glorified vendors. And that's just such a design fail. Again, I'm sorry. Normally what you do is you either create a lot of cities to have interesting locales, or you create one city but make it really, really detailed with really interesting characters. Like, think of Skyrim. Skyrim has, you know, 5 or 6 main cities. And those cities, the NPCs, they're pretty detailed, way more than Destiny, but they're not as detailed as some games. Like a Mass Effect, where you really get to know your crew and the other NPCs you encounter. But that's because Mass Effect has a limited number of NPCs, so they can devote a lot of time to them. Same with Borderlands 2. Borderlands 2 has a very small amount of NPCs, if you really count up the number of cast members, so to speak. But the thing is, Borderlands 2, all the NPCs are really detailed. And the guys you get fetch quests from, like I was saying, the few fetch quests they have, guys like Sir Hammerlock, Moxie, Ellie, the list goes on about Claptrap. Interesting characters in Borderlands 2 that you actually care about because you get to know them. And they've got great writing and great voice acting. The thing about Destiny is the NPCs in the tower, they were barely human. And I don't mean that because they were aliens. I mean they were barely relatable as far as having emotions and souls and spirits. They were just the glorified vendors. And again, how can anyone not say that's a design fail? Again, it's like, well, Destiny, they didn't have much time to make the game, and, they've got so many NPCs, they can't actually make them detailed. Because, like, a lot of MMOs, that's their defense. Like Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn, arguably one of the best MMOs. It's got tons of NPCs, tons, bazillions. And so they're not all super detailed, because there's so many of them. Destiny has one city, the tower, and it has, like 10 to 15 NPCs. That's all. And they couldn't even give us voice-acted lines for those NPCs, as far as, like, telling us who they are, what their motivations are. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. That's just unacceptable. To me, if I was a game reviewer, I'd mark the game down big time for that. No relatable NPCs that you care about. Boring vendors. It's just not good enough. And I have to mention the typical trope of, you're the only one who can save us, but there's literally 10, 15 other players in the tower at that moment jumping around like lunatics around you who are also the only ones who can save us. It's the typical MMO trope and pitfall of, how am I the only one that can save us when I literally am seeing right now in the room I'm standing in the game 10 other players or 5 other players? It's just crazy. Which is the reason why going with an MMO approach to Destiny doesn't make much sense, because there is no economy, there is no item trading, they've already said, there's no real interaction of factions, I mean like player factions. It's not like there's 2 different factions where you're fighting each other in the world, so why go with you can see other players in the tower? The best I've come up with is, because it's fun to dance. It's fun to dance with each other. That pretty much seems to be the extent of why I see other players in the tower. I mean, I'm not even joking. I can see them, okay, I can see their gear, and I can see them dance with their gear. This is crazy stuff. Like, why? I don't understand why Destiny would go with this approach of seeing other players in the tower. That makes it social. And I understand that, well, that's for matchmaking. That's their official statement they've said. It's for helping players get friends and do matchmaking. Plenty of other games have that. And in fact, it makes a lot more sense to have a designated area. You go to the tower, it's just you, but then there's this other room or other area where it's the lounge or the hangout. And so you can go there to actually make friends. Just because the problem is, again, they're not giving their story the respect it deserves. They're trying to tell some epic story, they've said. But if you look at the story they're telling, you're the chosen one, except there's a bunch of other players doing exactly what you're doing, and you can see them. I mean, that hurts the story. Imagine if in Halo, just think of it this way, a lot of people don't consider this. Think about Halo, if you were playing along, and you got Cortana talking to you, and you got the other guys, the military guys saying how important you are, and you need to go on this mission, and it's like, I'm the only one who can do it. I will succeed. And then all of a sudden, 4 other Master Chiefs appear, and they're told the same exact lines. That would really ruin your immersion. It would make no sense. Again, it's ludonarrative dissonance. You're being told one thing, but you're seeing another. That's unfortunately the case with Destiny in the tower when you're seeing all these other players. And again, it's just not needed. Have a separate room for matchmaking. That makes more sense. Otherwise, it's just total chaos in the tower. And now on to the lack of crafting. There might be crafting in the main game, but again, they said there's not really any new features, so I'm really doubting it. What I mean by crafting is not the typical MMO boring stuff. What I mean is, what would be really cool is if when you're in the exploring old Russia, for instance, if you could find weapon parts. you know, various parts of a weapon, because that makes perfect sense lore-wise. It's broken down world, they don't make guns anymore, so you have to find parts of broken weapons. And then you collect the parts by, you know, finding them in random locations, which encourages exploration. Then you go to the tower, and you have an NPC, maybe the cryptologist or maybe somebody else, assemble the parts. You know, after you've got enough, maybe you have to pay them, so, you know, you can use your glimmer and assemble guns, and you can customize guns. That makes a lot of sense. And also you could find parts of exotic weapons when you fight bosses or strike missions. You know, instead of just going to an NPC and buying an exotic weapon, which I've already said is frankly pathetic, terrible design, you could find exotic weapon parts and then take the parts and combine them together and make your own unique weapons. That would be so cool. You know, I think that's just a great idea to encourage exploration, to encourage you playing the game. And but unfortunately, it doesn't appear that way. It just appears that you do quest, get your glimmer, turn it in for exotic weapons to the NPCs, which is just boring. Another small but critical issue is how the game identifies items. When you're out in the field and you find a green item, or presumably, I've been told there's blue items that also have to be identified, you can't identify them on the fly. You have to go back to the tower. Now this is crazy to me. You know, what are we in? Stuck in 1998, but let's face, even in 1998 with Diablo, you could identify items with scrolls. And Destiny makes even less sense because, wait a minute, you've got this ghost companion who's this, you know, really advanced machine AI who can scan things. He has huge databases of knowledge, and you're telling me he can't identify or decrypt an item? I think there are some missions where you do decode stuff. Like, wasn't that one of the doors he had to break through its encryption and unlock it? And now you're telling me he can't decrypt an item in the field? It's just, it's bad narrative and lore, and it's bad gameplay. It's the worst of both, which is just crazy to me. I don't know what Bungie's thinking on a lot of this stuff. It's boring. I mean, it's obnoxious to get a gun that you have to identify and then be like, oh man, I can't use this for the rest of the mission. You know, I gotta wait and go back to the tower. I have to sit through loading screens and then go talk to the cryptologist NPC, who we talked about is a super boring generic guy with no backstory or no interest whatsoever, and have him decode the item for me. And then I gotta wait for another loading screen to get back into the action. So 2 loading screens just to identify an item. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm sure it was the same thing where I was playing the beta. I get an item I need to identify, and literally the only reason I go back to the tower is to identify the item, because it could be great. I wanted to know what it was. It's just crazy that you can't identify items in the field. To me, this is just one of these, like, minor oversights that causes massive headaches. The good news is they could easily patch this, but it's just, I don't understand Bungie. Like, it's like they're trying to reinvent the wheel with Destiny. Like, have they heard of looking at other games and seeing what works? It's just crazy that you can't identify things in the field. It makes no sense. Another issue I found is just the forced mission exit. You know, you have, like, I think it's a 30-second countdown after you finish a mission. Why does the game force me to leave? Why? Why does it do that? What's the legitimate reason for that? It makes no sense. Especially if I'm playing by myself. Like, I can understand in a strike mission, if you're playing in a group, they could be like, well, you know, we don't want people to lollygag. Still, let one of us quit, let the others stick around if they want to. There's nothing to do, but it's all about player choice and player freedom. You know, that's what good design is about in video games. And Bungie seems to go the opposite direction with this. Oh, you finished a mission? Well, guess what? You have 30 seconds and then you're going to leave. And sometimes the missions you finish, you don't even mean to finish them, because some of the missions are so, again, abrupt in the ending. It's like, go here, scan this computer. You scan it, and then all of a sudden it's like, great work, man, mission complete. And you're thinking, what? That was it? That's a different issue. Anyway, so all of a sudden you accidentally complete a mission, and the thing is, there's items you want to pick up, or you're in a new location that you want to explore just for maybe an extra minute or two, and then leave. Why does it force me to leave? It's just terrible design. I mean, let's face it, guys. Any game critics listening right now, don't give Destiny a pass for this. Don't do it just because it's Activision and Bungie. This is just bad design. Forcing me to leave and wait through a loading screen? Guess what your reward is for completing a mission, guys? 2+ loading screens. It'll take you back to the, you know, the little flying segment, then load to the tower, load back to old Russia, or whatever location. You've done so well in your mission, you get loading screens. Mandatory. Just remove the 30-second forced exit. on the topic of player freedom and player choice, I'll just very briefly mention the fact that you can only do raids with friends. That's just silly. I understand they're trying to protect us innocent players from ourselves. Because if we could just party up with random people, some of those people might quit, and they'd stink, and we wouldn't communicate properly, and it just wouldn't be fun. You know what? Let us decide. We're the players. If we don't enjoy the experience, nobody will do it. But the point is, you're removing player freedom, and it is kind of obnoxious for those of us who are clearly incapable of making friends. I mean, listen to me now. Do you think I can make friends for a raid? Clearly not. Talk to my therapist. But anyway, joking aside, it just let us group up with people, strangers, if we want to. Why limit our freedom as a player? A small note here that some people disagree with, so this is not one of the fundamental problems, but I think Ghost is miscast. I think Peter Dinklage is an amazing actor for what he does, but he's kind of a sarcastic, edgy, witty type guy, which is just not what you want from a companion. Look at Cortana. There's a reason why people loved her. Look at other companions that people really loved. Garrus from Mass Effect. Because they were, in the true good sense, bros, or female bros, in Cortana's case. Anyway, Peter Dinklage, he's just not a very sympathetic voice actor in the way he's voicing the lines, and also the dialogue is not written well. I just think he's totally miscast. He's a great actor, but not for this role. I don't know why they went with him. It's like, I think they went with him because he's a big name. I hate to say it, but it would have been great if they got someone who was a little bit more interesting as an AI and relatable. I could be wrong because we haven't played the full game, so anyway. Another missed opportunity is no world multiplayer. What I mean is, I think it'd be really cool is if when you're exploring the world you can encounter hostile guardians, because let's face it, in the real world, not everyone is kind to each other, especially in the lore of Destiny, where it's this broken down world with not many resources and you're all kind of struggling. That's at least how it sounds to me. This idea that we have some utopia now, even though we're in the middle of the apocalypse, where everyone gets along, all the guardians are friends. Why not make it so when you come across groups of other players, you can actually fight each other if you want to? I know a lot of players are not going to like that because they don't want to have other players come decimate them. But my point is, you could make it an additional mode. You could, let people choose. Like if you're trying to emulate MMOs, MMOs have your PvE and your PvP, servers where you can go fight against players just in the open world. So I think that's just a missed opportunity, because I would much rather just in exploring come across some other players and fight with them than go into the hardcore crucible mode where it's just these small tiny maps and it's boring and no exploration. So again, just a missed opportunity. And if you're going to charge $60 for a game, why not give us all the content that other games have given us? I don't think that's unreasonable. And also the Iron Banner event where you can be at different levels and play against each other competitively. To me, that's just the most ridiculous, terrible design idea ever. A big problem with competitive multiplayer is how unbalanced it is in so many games. So let me get this right. Instead of trying to make it more balanced, you're going to make it less balanced by letting players of different levels compete against each other. That just makes no sense. I mean, that's just Looney Tunes. Frankly, I think it's crazy. I know it's entirely optional, which is good, because not many people are probably going to engage in it, but it's just a crazy idea. Instead of doing this idea, why don't they do something like ranked multiplayer? Like games like Counter-Strike Global Offensive and StarCraft 2, and I've been told even games like Hearthstone, I haven't played it personally, but they have ranking systems where if you play enough matches, the game ranks you based on your skill, based on your KD, kill-death ratio that is, or the time you've played, or the win-loss ratio for matches. But Destiny, just like a lot of other first-person shooters, which is why I'm not bashing on them too much, Destiny that is, there's no ranking system. It's like Call of Duty, where it's just a free-for-all, which makes no sense. It's like having some NBA, basketball star play against some junior high or high school, or middle school team. It makes no sense. If Destiny wants to really be the next evolution of shooters and truly revolutionary like all the hype says, it needs to have a ranking system for multiplayer. Otherwise, it's just the typical insanity of, the pro obsessive players killing the noobs constantly and posting videos on the internet about 40-0 matches. It's just lame. And briefly about these grimoire cards. What is the deal with these cards? You get these cards in-game, or you unlock them theoretically, and I have to go to their website? What? Some of us are saying, I can't believe that's how the full game will be, but they've said that's how it's going to be. So unless they were mistaken, I mean, Bungie that is, which I doubt they are mistaken about their own game, I get grimoire card unlocks, and I have to visit their website to read little lore bits? That's crazy. You know, let's think. Having lore that you can read in your game, that's the way all the sensible games do it. You don't have to go to a website to read about it. Like, is Destiny not advanced enough to show me text? To have, you know, an encyclopedia? Like, what did Mass Effect have? The Codex or something that you could go refer to? I mean, this whole grimoire card thing, where I have to go to the website, is Looney Tunes. I mean, let's just face it. That, again, is terrible design. Oh, gee, I unlocked some grimoire card. I wonder what it does. Oh, I have to stop playing and go to their website. That is pure Looney Tunes. So unless I'm misunderstanding this, and if I am, I apologize, this seems like just an absurd concept. And to me, this, if I'm a reviewer, I'm marking the game off for this, too. I'm saying, website I have to visit? I don't know, maybe the app on the iPad will let me do it, but still, in-game. In-game. And very briefly, call me jaded and cynical, but let's face it, the level cap of 20, even with the soft cap of level 30 with the, with the better gear, there's one reason for the low level cap, let's just say it. DLC, expansions, level cap increases. I'm sorry, maybe I'm just jaded about that, but having such a low level cap is a big hit against the game because people enjoy leveling up. And I know they've said, well, after you finish leveling, you can still level. It's like crazy. You know, your skills still level up. Okay. But still, the low level cap seems to me a clear example of they're going to expand it as they release more DLC or expansions. Again, maybe I'm just jaded and bitter. Speaking of expansions, they've already announced the Season Pass as expected, like all games do these days, it seems like. The thing I want to note is not that there's a Season Pass, because I'm fine with that. The Season Pass problem I have is someone asked them, well, the first one that you've announced, will it have a new area? And their answer was, well, I'm going to weasel out of that question, but basically, no. No, it will not have a new area. Let me get this right. I'm going to pay $30 more for a game for the Season Pass, so which I get 2 expansions, so that's $15 per expansion. The main game cost me $60. So 60 divided by 4, which is 4 areas in the game, would be $15. So I'm going to pay $15 more, and I know the math doesn't exactly work out. There's a lot more to the game than just areas. But so I'm paying $15 for a new expansion, 1/4 of the price I paid for the full game. But I'm not getting a new area? I'm not getting a new planet, is what I mean? They said, well, it'll take place in existing areas plus some new stuff, which is their way of saying no new planet. That's weak sauce. Again, weak sauce. No new planet for an expansion? Man, they are failing us game design-wise, marketing-wise. Pay $15, you don't even get a new planet. And finally, my nitpick that I'm kind of just doing as a funny note, but I do honestly think it's a problem, is their marketing slogan, Destiny, Become Legend. Grammar! Am I the only one who reads that and just gets annoyed as a grammar person? As a writer, I get annoyed. It says, Become Legend. No, the grammar is Become a Legend. Become the Legend. Become legendary. That's grammar, folks. Become Legend is not grammatically sound. Alright? It's just, I don't know, to me it's just pretentious. It's like, I know they're not trying to be. This is like kind of like unintentional pretentiousness. Hey, we're Bungie. We made an awesome game. You can become legend. Our game is so good it transcends grammar. Man. Become a legend. Become the legend. Become legendary. Any of those options I would work with. But I understand it's just a silly marketing thing. But grammar, folks. You need it. As an outro or conclusion, folks, I just want to say again that I really want Bungie and Destiny to succeed. I do. I've been looking forward to the game, but I can't shake the feeling that there's just so many flaws with Destiny. It's just going to be kind of a middling, average, okay game with some serious design flaws, mostly because they've borrowed MMO concepts without understanding those concepts. It really does seem like they're trying to reinvent the wheel with Destiny. It seems like they sort of feel that they're such good developers, which they are, that they don't need to study other games. It seems like they're not. Why not take the great things from Borderlands 2? Why not take the great things from MMOs, but not include the bad stuff? It just seems like they've gone back to square one and said, let's just create a game from scratch, pretending no other games have ever existed. And so what you get is a lot of these problems I've talked about, some fundamental issues, plus a lack of content, a lack of focus and vision. You get only 4 areas, and those areas are sparse, and the content seems to just be thrown in, and the story has a lot of ludonarrative dissonance where it's telling you one thing, but you're not actually doing that. It's a lot of, hey, you're the one legendary guy, but there's plenty of other players doing this, and go do these fetch quests, and the NPCs sell exotic weapons, but, we're not going to give you one, even though we really are relying on you. And instead of finding legendary weapons or finding parts of them, we're just going to have you buy them from vendors, and the vendors have no personality. And you can't ID weapons in the field, you got to go back to the tower, and missions force you to end after 30 seconds, even if you don't want to leave, even if the next mission starts right where you're at. It's just a lot of issues, and so I just wanted to put this video out. Maybe I'll look like a fool when the game comes out, maybe it will be the best ever, and I will do another video apologizing if such is the case, but I just wanted to put this out for the record to say, before the game has come out, here's these issues. I really think that Destiny's going to have big problems, and I think the review scores are going to be much higher than they should be. But I'd be happy to be proven wrong, so thank you very much for watching, everyone. Bye-bye.